we are live, and so we are all set and ready to go.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to, I guess it's a little bit of a new version of Career Coaches on Call because we're once a month now. So these sessions, I think, are always good and probably be even more valuable. We'll have to get more stuff in since it's only once a month. So welcome, everybody. I'm Ken Schur. I'm a career coach and executive coach. And now I can even say I'm an author. I wrote a book called What's Trust Got to Do with It? And it's about helping people with their careers and the job search included. And I'm happy to be hosting tonight. And we have two of our regular three coaches. Hopefully Charla will make it, but she's got some personal things she's dealing with. And she may be late if she makes it at all. But how about tonight we're going to talk about really kind of resetting for 2026 and kind of getting back after being a little bit maybe out of your normal routine towards the end of the year with the holidays and everything. And so we'll talk about strategies and how to get back going again for 2026 with your job search. So with that, I'm going to introduce our coaches. And if you guys maybe could start us off with a quick tip and introduce yourselves, that'd be great. So why don't we start with Melanie?
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Happy January. It's my transition from Happy New Year. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Melanie Mitchell-Wexler. I am a career coach working with senior to executive leaders that are looking to pivot and transition into new opportunities. Let's see if I can actually speak. Little rusty on this whole LinkedIn Live thing. And I'm also a LinkedIn strategist. So I combine the two with both job searching and LinkedIn to help you be found, seen, and heard. So super excited about that. And we're super excited to be here, I should say. And one of the things that I would recommend as we start in the new year, because I know obviously coming off of the holidays and a lot of frustrations and when it comes to job searching and maybe getting some of those rejections kind of coming in or haven't heard back from anybody, is just really treat it as a reset. Go back to specifically your LinkedIn profile, go back to your resume. Let's see where we can update and improve it. Now's an opportune time to take a new approach to your job search, take a new attitude to your job search, and really just reset it. And I think it helps with our mindsets, but also how the approach that we're going to take. And sometimes taking a new approach is the thing that will open doors. So be open-minded with that. So a couple of little helpful hints hopefully in there. So I'll pass the mic back to you.
Thanks, Melanie. I think those are very helpful. I think, with when it's downtime or like you say, you're not getting responses or you're getting rejections, even just rereading your resume and LinkedIn profile, just reminding yourself of all the good stuff you've done, that can help get your head back to where it needs to be for a good job search. So thanks for that. And Alan, how about you? Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Kirshner. I'm a career coach from New Jersey. I help people with job search strategies, interview prep, LinkedIn profile optimization, resumes, and salary negotiation. And my tip would be set some goals and get into a routine. I know, the holiday time is a time to be doing other things and seeing family and travel and that kind of stuff too. But it's January now, so I think it's good to have some goals that you set for yourself and have a schedule too. So it's good to get back into the routine that you had prior to the holiday season. And again, it's a time for a fresh start as well too. It's a new year. There's optimism and there's opportunity for great things to happen this year.
Yep, I think that's exactly right, Alan. It's reset time for a lot of us. Just got to get back to a routine and get back into things we're comfortable with. And even though job search is outside the comfort level a lot of times, it's what you got to do. So thank you for that. It's good again to have you guys both back. And so let's think about somebody who, maybe in the fourth quarter of last year, they really started their job search. started getting into it. We're having some good networking conversations, I guess, maybe applying to some jobs or maybe even having some interviews. And now, as we've heard and said, it's quiet. What would you suggest, Melanie, to restart the job search and kind of start to get some action going?
The first place that I would start, I would go back through the positions that you applied for in the last 30 days. I would start to go look at those. And honestly, a lot of those, you may feel like they're dead, but I will tell you, having been a former recruiter, they're not. A lot of times, job postings that are happening that you might see in late November, early throughout December, those are gearing up for the first quarter. They know that they have those planned, they're budgeted for. They've been told that they're going to be able to hire, so they want to start the pipeline. Now, they may not do anything with initially with reaching out because of obviously the holidays and not getting too far out. So now's a great time to kind of move yourself, what I call, out of the stack of resumes and start reaching out to individuals within the organization. Build those relationships. Don't be afraid to expand your connections and really be looking at who are some, the companies that you are interested in. Are you connected with those individuals? Really do, a cleanup from that standpoint. And I think that's that's one of the most important things is don't just assume that everything's kind of dead in the water, so to speak. You really, there's a lot of opportunities that probably honestly will come back to fruition, or come back to the table that even as far back as October. But to keep it pretty simple, I would go, and look at the last, 30 days, see where those are, and I would start with a strong networking approach. That would be where I would start. See if you can revive. Those are also ones that if they had hired, a lot of times, I think statistically, most of new hires, I think it's somewhere like 40 percentile or something of that nature. This is when I miss Charlotte because she always knows these numbers off the top of her head. But is, being able that usually it's, I think it's like 40% or something of hires fall off within the first 90 days. Also, people that accepted jobs tend, don't always commit to their start date. They end up moving to another job or end up declining. So a lot of those jobs you applied for can actually very much still be open. And now's the time to kind of get into the conversations with the hiring managers.
That's I think that's great information, Melanie. And let me ask you too, as a former recruiter, is January a big hiring month? Is that a month? Like with December, we know it slows down but doesn't stop. Does January accelerate?
So January is a little bit, January is a slow burn. I call it January's like a slow burn because the first, like last week, people are still getting acclimated. And I see John has a question, like, is there a line between following up without coming across aggressively? And I'll answer that here in just 2 seconds. So the first week of January, so I consider that like last week, people are still getting acclimated. They're getting back into their routines. They're catching up on emails. They may have been out of the office, for an extended period of time. So you kind of have to look, I always say give a little grace. Grace goes a long ways. And so this is the week that you're going to kind of see a little bit of a pickup. Now, what happens in United States is then we get hit with the Martin Luther King holiday. And so you'll find that my life as a recruiter revolved around a lot of holidays as to when hiring is. And so we'll kind of have a little bit of a speed bump where people, we get into the routine and it's like, oh, I get an extra day off. And so it kind of throws a little bitty wrench into it. But by middle of next week into the end of the month, we are going to you should start seeing a pickup. A lot of my clients have started already in December. We're seeing still a fair amount of job postings that were out there that were coming out fresh and that were brand new, which is positive. And so really where we want to start is kind of going back to those because people that they maybe thought they had lined up for interviews, things of that nature, maybe no longer interested, or have taken other opportunities. So now's an opportunity to say, raise your hand. So, and to John's question, I think it's not about a matter of, coming off as, without coming across aggressively, because truthfully, it's a matter of your approach. It's how you approach somebody. It's how you speak to somebody. If you're very kind of like antagonistic and like, well, why aren't, like, I haven't heard from you, or, why are like, you just anything along those kind of lines, then no, yeah, somebody's not going to be responsive. However, if you're polite, you're professional, and not doing a follow-up every single week, like literally ask them like, hey, um can you tell me when would be a good time to follow up? There may come a time, I kind of do rules of three. If I haven't gotten any feedback, from that, then I'm, tend to kind of pull, tend to just say, hey, let's go where we're receiving feedback. But I don't necessarily think that, I think it's in the approach. It's not a matter of, you need to be aggressive when it comes to your job search, because you have to be your biggest and best advocate. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to follow up. You want to keep it professional, and you want to showcase that.
Yeah, it is a tough one, because it's I think it's important that people don't feel like, oh, I don't want to be pushy, I don't want to be obnoxious. And yeah, there is a fine line with that, but you also don't want to look back and say, why didn't I call him? I should have called, or I should have reached out. So I think, as Melanie says, a lot of it's in the approach, but don't put yourself in a position where you look back on woulda, shoulda, coulda. Alan, as you start reworking with your clients, where do you find yourself going to get people back on track?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is the mindset, just getting back into the mode and just thinking about the job search. And again, I think Jay made a comment there that, job seeking never takes a day off, which is true, but you also have to have some downtime. That's one of the things I talk to my clients about. I spoke to somebody last week that was a new client, and she was saying she was up till like 3 or 4 in the morning working on a profile, and she does some things with graphics. So she, was trying to put a portfolio together. I said, you really need to pace yourself also. You can't, be going 24/7 all the time, because you're just going to burn out. So I think you have to be able to pace yourself for one, but you need to get into and set up a routine too. So I think that's important, as far as the structure and the ability to maintain that. I think it's important. Another thing I would say that's really helpful is getting out there and being with people. Again, we talk a lot of times about job search being, something that can be lonely, and especially if you're just searching in front of your computer. So things have opened up quite a bit with meetings not only being virtual now, but they're in-person meetings of trade associations or alumni associations and things like that. So I think another thing to help jumpstart your job search again is to get out there and meet people, be with people, and just have that personal interaction. I think it's really helpful to really get out there and talk to people. And, networking online is something that you can do, but networking in person is just much more effective. So I highly recommend finding opportunities to get out there and to talk to people in person.
Yep. And I think that's it's a good way to get warmed up again and get back, get your head back, like you say, Alan. I think that's great advice. Excuse me, I'm just looking through the chat as well, and just want to welcome everybody. Gregory, it's always great to have you back. And Merrill from Paramus, New Jersey, great to have you too. And we have someone from Utah. We have someone from Chicago. So Sherilyn from Minnesota. We're getting people from all over the place. It's great to see. So glad you're here. And Gregory mentions you took some time last week to kind of ease into it, didn't want to bull rush people. I think that's a great way to put it. People can come back feeling overwhelmed, A, because they're not in the groove yet, and B, because they have stuff maybe to catch up on. And if you're calling them and harassing them, that's not a good thing. But to Melanie and Alan's point, getting out and talking to people, being cognizant of what you're saying and how you're saying it, I think that can make a difference. And again, you don't want to miss any opportunities because you're being overly cautious either. Alan, you mentioned something about, the time, putting in that effort and all. I do hear people saying that looking for a job is a full-time job. And conceptually, I get that. I got to be honest, though. If I were looking for a job right now, I don't see myself putting in 40, 50 hours a week doing that. I think I would be, practically speaking, difficult for me. Feel free to disagree with me, but what's your feeling on that idea of the kind of effort people need to put in to be successful with a job search?
I completely agree with you, Ken. I think 40 hours a week isn't necessarily, realistic, especially you have other things that you're doing in your life. You have family responsibilities. You need to get out and, do other things. So I think 40 hours is a bit more than I would recommend. I would say more like 20 or 25 hours. But again, it's not so much always the amount, it's the quality of what you're doing too. And one thing I think that's helpful is you don't have to necessarily look at it as, going structured time, for 8 hours. You can you can do things in the morning, you can do things later in the day. So you don't have to, you can have breaks in between where you have a gap where you go out and take a walk or you do something else that you enjoy doing. So I think it's important, again, to have a schedule, because that's one of the things when you're in job search, different than when you were working, is you don't really necessarily have a schedule. So I think it's important to build one in, and also keep track of what you're doing too. I think, sometimes you don't always realize what you're doing, or how much you're doing. So I think it's important to keep like a log of the things that you're doing and how much time you're spending on things. And again, set a daily goal where you're looking at, this is what I'm going to do today. Have a list of your top 3 or 4 or 5 things. And when you get to the, at the end of the day, go back and look at it and say, hey, I got to these 3 things, but the other 2 I didn't get to. So what am I going to do for tomorrow? So I think, again, helping to build this structure in place, I think, is really helpful, but also you don't want to burn yourself out too. I mean, when you're working full time, when you're in the office, you're not working every minute that you're there. I mean, there's times, when you're at lunch, you're taking a break, you're talking to people in the coffee room. So it's not like, you're constantly working every single minute of the day. So you don't have to look at job search that way either. And I think the balance is really key to being successful. It's not so much the quantity, it's the quality.
Yeah, I think that's great, Alan. You're right. Balance is what it's about. The reason why I bring it up, and Melanie, I'd love your perspective too. Again, feel free to disagree with Alan and me. But when I hear people say that, I feel like, oh my gosh, so people who hear that and think, well, I'm not putting in 40 or 50 hours a week, I must not be doing everything I should be doing. And maybe it reinforces some of that negativity that often comes with a job search. So when I hear it from people, it bothers me, because I think the way Alan put it, I like that. It's not necessarily doing 40 or 50 hours straight. You're probably not going to do that amount of hours, but it's really the quality of it, and it may come in chunks here and there. But what are your thoughts, Melanie? You may be on mute if you're talking, or you may not like the question, so you just
no, I was on mute. So no, I think anybody that's been here before knows I'm very big on mindset, and where one of the biggest things that people get caught up is very much burning themselves out with a job search. Now, I will be very honest with you as a recruiter. I always say recruiters are a little bit different, because literally our job as a recruiter is you get like 95% rejected throughout the entire day, and you live off of like one yes. And so you tend to have to, but truthfully, in the job search, you're gonna have to have a thick skin. You really are. Now, rejection is going to feel personal. It is not personal. You have to look at rejection as like, okay, let me evaluate. You have to literally remove yourself from it and say, okay, what is it that I could be doing better? What is it that is there something that happened in that situation? And not that you're replaying it over and over in your head, but to the whole point of like we're, doing a 40-hour job search, please don't do that. If you give yourself like, okay, today I even say this with like, okay, today I'm going to do like 20 minutes of um 20 minutes of networking on LinkedIn. I'm going to, you may not be able to, I don't want you applying for hundreds of jobs, at most, like one or two jobs at most a day, if that, because I want you to be super selective. And if the more selective you are, the better you are going to hone in on where your qualifications actually match. And so being very like more fine details, so you're not necessarily spending all of that time and then like, okay, today I look at LinkedIn, tomorrow I might look at Indeed. That's not going to take 40, that's not going to take 8 hours of your day. If you get that rejection and it stings, walk away from your computer, walk away from your phone. Now I have my phone all the time. I love listening to music helps, motivate me to work. I run to music. I live by my music in a lot of different ways, especially if I need a pick me up. So, I will turn on my music. I will just, be in my little space when I need that. And so do something like that. But that, get up, go take a walk. I know it's cold in a lot of places. You may have, even if it's outside, getting some of that fresh, cold air. And I don't do this, but I might, is actually helpful. It's actually helpful for your system. It kind of jumpstarts your system. So walk away from your computer when you're feeling it and then go, okay, you know what? Tomorrow's a new day, new approach. And again, the attitude we bring to something is honestly the attitude that I know it sounds like fluff, but it is scientifically proven that, the way we approach something, if we sit down at our computers and go, well, what's the point of applying? I know I'm going to get rejected. We manifest that, we start to manifest those rejections, because that's literally then what's happening, because we're setting the expectation. And so we have to kind of change our mindset is big in job search. Confidence is big in job search. And so if you do anything every single day, focus on your mindset and confidence.
Yeah, I think it's the most underrated part of a job search. I think people don't realize that um, they send signals. We send signals of what we're really feeling or what we're really thinking. So I think it's important that you have that as positive mindset. Now I know it's easier said than done sometimes, but that's again where I go back to reread your resume, relook at your LinkedIn profile, remind yourself of how good you are, and build your confidence through reality, through the facts of your career. There was a question I just saw there about, is anything changed in terms of job search in 2026 versus 2025? I mean, it's hard to say since we're only a couple weeks in, but I don't know. Let's come back, start with Melanie, and then go back to Alan this time. Do you see anything different this year that people should be aware of or look for?
There was a really good, and I'll look to see if I can put it in the chat. I'll look for it. There was an article that came out from LinkedIn News today. It was a really good in-depth article. There it is. I found it. So there was a really good article. I'll put the link in the chat for it. Kind of breaking down what the 2026 job market is looking like, and it was a good article across the board. So I would encourage people to check that out and read it. I'll put it in the chat for everybody on LinkedIn to see it. What I would say is the same thing that I was saying at the end of last year, is this particular job market, and I say this saying, I've been through two job markets that were two recessions. I was a coach during COVID. I've started as a recruiter in the very best job market that we have ever seen in the States. We'll, by the way, never see that again, because there was a reason for that. And so, so I've seen all different types of job markets, and this job market is very unique. It is not acting like, based on the numbers, we know that unemployment has technically remained steady. I think that number maybe it ticked up a little bit, but not by a whole lot, but it's been around 4%. Um, and so what we know is that and this is what I'm telling my clients, this market is forcing you to have you have to be uber clear and clear and clarity. It's forcing clarity across the board. And this is something our partner Charlotte also talks about. It's called what we call the differentiating factor. Why should somebody hire you? It's not enough anymore to say I'm qualified. You have to back this up. You have to be able to show what you're going to bring to the table and how you bring, I call it positive impact. You have to be able to prove your that you're bringing something and set yourself apart. That is, because when hiring is stalled, which is kind of where we're at, like we're hiring still happening, but it's not necessarily moving at the speed of light. Obviously, expectations rise. And the ones that are able to move forward are the ones that are clearly articulating what makes them different. They understand their value. And so you have to be super clear on that, but it has to be clear every single step of the way. It's not enough to say it in the first interview. You have to say it you have to be on repeat every single interview from start to finish. And that has to be shown in your LinkedIn and your resume. Sorry, I kind of went off on that one. But so
That's
um
all right.
but I think that is still part of 2025, but so I don't think anything's massively different. We're not seeing anything massively shift, at least in the US economy right now. But that being said, it is forcing, like I would call uber clarity when it comes to that.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Melanie. And Alan, we always talk about, and it seems like everybody talks about how networking. 80% of jobs are landed through networking, through someone you know. Um, can you address that first through the eyes of somebody who says, oh, I hate networking. That's not me. I'm an introvert. I don't like it. How do it's easy for us to say network, but how does someone who doesn't like it or is an introvert do it? And what should what does a networking conversation sound like?
Yeah, great question. One of the things I think that's a misnomer about networking and introverts is that actually introverts are very good at networking, because networking is one-on-one relationships. And extroverts like to be in a big group of people, talking to a lot of people, versus introverts are very comfortable just speaking one-on-one, typically with somebody else. So the fact that you're an introvert, myself included, doesn't preclude you from networking. As a matter of fact, it could be a superpower that you have that the extroverts don't have, because one, usually you're a good listener. You like to be in situations where you're just talking to one person. So that's one thing. But I think, part of it is just talking to people. And I think you need to start out, when you're not comfortable doing it, by talking to people that you have some things in common with. Start out your networking by talking to people that were former colleagues, people that you know from religious organizations or alumni. So it's really important to have something in common with the people that you're networking with. It's also important not to ask somebody, can you help me get a job? Because that's really a big ask. Networking is really sharing information between two people. So it's a matter of talking to people, talking about what you do, what you're looking for, but also listening a lot, finding out how can you help them. What is it, in your background or the contacts that you have that might be helpful for somebody else? I think it's developing, and people can also call networking relationship development. So that maybe sounds a little less scary than networking, but it's really talking to people. So you want to get out there in situations where you have something in common with people. It's also helpful, cold calling or, that aspect of trying to connect with people is more challenging, and they don't necessarily aren't going to be as receptive to talking to you. So you need to have something in common typically for this to get started. And again, going to a an event where people are there to do that, that can help facilitate it as well too. And you can just start out simply by saying, oh, what brought you here, or what were you looking to accomplish by being here? You can ask a lot of questions when you network, and that's really a good way of doing it. I think that's helpful and is important. And when it becomes more of a conversation, it just makes it easier. You don't feel as much pressure. When you listen a lot, people are always willing to talk to you about what they do, and that's a really helpful technique with networking, to be a good listener and think, and listen, and also be there to not only ask for something, i.e., don't ask for a job, but ask for information, um, and referrals and advice, and also to be there to assist other people as well too.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that's missed a lot of times too. Is that you should offer help to the person that's given you the time to network with them. You want to make sure they know that it's not just about you. You want to help them also. Um, and I think your concept, Alan, of finding something in common. I mean, I guess if you keep it as, oh, it's a networking conversation, it can be intimidating, as opposed to try to think of it about, like, if you were going to a cocktail party and just meeting people and learning about people, and starting up conversations with someone maybe you don't know. It might start with, how do you know the host or hostess of the party? It might start with, oh, I see you're wearing a university sweatshirt, did you go there? Or you can find those things on LinkedIn. You can make those connections. So I think what's also important about a networking conversation is not just going in and saying, okay, I got this call with Alan, I'm going to call him and see what happens. If I were having a networking conversation, I'd look at his LinkedIn profile. I'd see if we have any common connections. I'd see if we have any common companies or interests. I might look him up and see if I can find him on Facebook or Google, just to find out more about him and see if there's something common that I could start the conversation with, that has nothing to do with work, has nothing to do with their career or their job or my job or anything like that. Try to look at it that way. Some people might look at it as a game. I'm going to see how much information I can get or give, or whatever it might be. But, go in with a plan. I think that's also important. Don't go in blind, because that's, even if you're an extrovert, that's really a tough thing to come out of it with something that's useful for you. So Melanie, where do you find these networking connections? By the way, I love Alan's suggestion too. Start with people you know somewhat well, get used to it, and see how that works. But Melanie, where else do you go to find, and also I'd like to ask you about, it's group networking meetings versus one-on-ones. Like, what are your general thoughts about that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, well, first off, a couple of things. I want to give a shout out to Linda Brubaker. She has I think she calls them her lunch and learns, if she's still calling them that. But she does an amazing kind of it's a Zoom, it's a group where, job seekers can come. She brings in speakers. I've had the opportunity to speak to that group. But she does an amazing job. That's an amazing group she's curated. Places like that have started. And so, that's a great place. I have a client that, and I'm going to put an asterisk by this, just like I did for him, but there were several people. He works for a very big firm in the Seattle area, and they actually started getting together for coffee. The people, unfortunately, a group that had been laid off, and so they started getting together, and they actually started to kind of pool their resources. So they were like, okay, here's the recruiter I talked to today. This is a job that I'm not qualified for, but I think you might be. So they started pulling their resources together, and I told them, I said, the only stipulation, I said, I love it because he's a little bit of an introvert, my client is. And I said, the only stipulation that I gave him is that, as long as it's productive and it's not well, I'll just say, not a bitch session. I said, you can definitely air some concerns, but watch being caught up in negativity. Because when you surround yourself, again, I know I'm going to go a little woohoo on everybody, but the last thing you need in a job search is extra negativity being surrounded by it. So if
Mhm.
as long as it's people that are being supportive, and yes, you're going to have negative moments, and it's okay to acknowledge, and you should acknowledge those, and you should um receive them and let them kind of set in, but don't sit in that moment. Don't let yourself rest in that moment that that's where you land. Because all of that negativity, that negative voice, that negative attitude, I promise you one thing it does do, it shows up on interviews. It shows up through phone conversations on recruiters. How do I know? Because I've been the recipient of them.
Hmm.
And it's like, hey, I want to work with you, but you're not making it very, like, I get you bringing the frustrations, but we sometimes have to leave those frustrations at the door. So that was my only stipulation with that particular group, but he's enjoyed that time because he's like, well, I have a meeting with people, I get out of the house, we meet at a local coffee shop, we have conversation, like he was getting, kind of a little antsy of having been in, out of work for a while, and so it's really kind of helped revive him, but they're sharing resources. So these are also great, like, check out other linked, of course, stay with us every single month for LinkedIn
Yes.
Live. But there's a lot of resources out there, there's a lot of networking groups, and so I just really encourage you to, like, you may go to them and be like, oh, that's not really for me, or that's not really my group. And that's perfectly okay. But there are just so many things out there. So just kind of check them out, see if it's the right group for you, if it's the right type of people for you. And then, if one or two people that are actively looking, I know it sounds, again, if you find people that are looking for the same job you are, network with them, because I promise you this, not everybody just because they're searching for the same job doesn't mean every job you guys are going to be, matches for. It might be a different job in a different location, or maybe one person wants more money, or, things like that, or one's remote, one's open. So just be open and flexible. That would be the biggest advice. And I would even say, like, well, I know we'll go to John's question. I put that up on the screen, but that would be one thing I would say to John in terms of how do you stand out? Be open and flexible. I will tell you, the candidates that I had the most success with through two recessions and placing candidates into jobs were the ones that were the most flexible, and the ones that were most open. They were open to hearing about all types of opportunities, and just had a very open approach. And so they didn't close themselves off to opportunities. And that really can be a game changer for you as well.
Hmm. Excellent. I think that's great. And I'm glad you addressed the how do you stand out in 2026, because I definitely want to talk about that too. Alan, what are your thoughts on that, standing out?
Yeah, it's really key to differentiate yourself so that that goes with everything, your marketing documents, like your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So that's one of the things we haven't talked too much about AI today. Actually, I don't think it's been brought up at all, but using AI to write things, like in particular your resume or cover letters for that matter, you tend to sound like everybody else because AI kind of writes it the same way. So it's really important to show who you are and what makes you different. And part of that is getting an understanding about that and writing down things about yourself. These are my strengths, these are the things that I'm good at, and also talking to other people that have worked with you, that know you, and say, what would be, you know, the things that you would say are my biggest strengths, or the things that I would be the go-to person for. So you want to play to your strengths, and you want to show and differentiate yourself, how you're different. And when it comes to your resume and interviewing in particular, the it's really important to show those differences too, and particularly showing not just what you've done on a job as far as what your responsibilities were, but actually what you've accomplished, and really try to quantify those things and show an organization, these are the type of things that I do, and this is how I'm adding value to the organizations that I've been with. I've helped them with increasing revenue, reducing costs, doing things that made things more efficient. So it's really, you want to stand out from the crowd by show what makes you different, right? That's the important thing. And you have to look at it from the perspective of what is the organization that you're interviewing with need? What are their pain points? It's really important to think about what can I do for them more than what are they doing for me, or what is this job going to do for me? So you're selling a service, and the service is you and what you're going to provide and help them with. So I think it's important that you don't want to just sound like everybody else. You have to show what makes you unique and different, and that's part of your LinkedIn profile, your resume, and also on the job interview. That's really important too.
Yeah, I think that's really right on, Alan. I mean, the first and foremost, it's about the value you bring, and what you bring to the table that's different than other people. But there's also a couple things. I think there's a bit of a paradox too. Like, for example, with resumes, on one hand, you want to stand out from the crowd. On the other hand, if you put together like this kind of exotic looking resume, a recruiter could look at that and say, I don't have time to figure out what the heck this is. I'm moving on and going to something that's easy to read. And I think that's the paradox. You got to stand out to the crowd, from the crowd, yet you have to kind of be like the rest of the crowd because you want the recruiter to be able to read it easily. And so it's the content. I think that's what Alan's talking about. It's the value that you bring. It's different. But also, I would say outside of that, you've got to get noticed. How are you going to get noticed? It's interesting. I think, it could be little things like sending a pre-interview thank you note. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tomorrow. I really look forward to sharing how I can help you do blah, blah, blah. Just a simple 2-sentence like that. I'm sure most people aren't doing that. It might be sending something through snail mail instead of an email that, if you can find their address these days, I know that's hard, but if you can get them something that they can actually look at and feel, that could be it. But certainly if you have a live interview, especially if it's in person, if you have something you can leave behind, a little, I call them brag books. That's what we used to call them in the pharmaceutical industry. That's just like 3-4 pages, maybe a couple more than that, but just very highlighting the what you could bring, the value you bring. Because I believe, if they're interviewing 3 people, it might happen over a 2 or 3 week span. If you get interviewed in the first week, by the time they're starting to talk about who they're going to pick, it's a little fuzzy. So if you have left them something to remind them of you, I think that could be a differentiator. But again, I think it comes back to what Alan said. It still comes down to what's the value you can bring? How can you solve the problems that they have? That's how you're going to differentiate yourself, really, those different ways. Alan, in terms of LinkedIn, what do people need to do? Is there anything different they need to do in 2026? Or once again, how do they jumpstart their search through LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's really interesting with LinkedIn. I mean, it's still the main platform for job seekers. So it's still important to have a presence on there. Some people are saying that it's becoming more like Facebook with the way people are posting, and I see things there that are political and other stuff that doesn't seem like it's the right forum to be talking about that stuff too. So I think it's important still to have a presence on LinkedIn, but not just have a presence, be active on LinkedIn. Use it as a research tool to find information about companies, show them you're interested. It's really important to connect with people at the organizations that you're interested in. That helps them realize that you are definitely interested in our company and organization. It's not that you're just, you're following us, you have connections there. So I think that's really an important component too. But it's also good to be active. It's really important to be active. You may feel uncomfortable publishing, your own content initially, but it's good to start by following people, by commenting on things that they're saying, starting conversations. And once you get up, more confidence, it's good to post things as well too. And you don't have to, again, necessarily share original content all the time. You can just forward something on that you saw to your connections and say, I really thought this was a very insightful article. And point two in particular was one that I thought was really great. So I think, there's different levels of activity, but just to be active and to stay active on LinkedIn, that's the way you come up higher on searches. I think I wanted to jump in for a second, and Mindy had a question about how do you navigate the growing number of questionable or potentially fake recruiters out on LinkedIn. So I think you do have to be cautious with LinkedIn as well too, because there's a lot of fake stuff going on out there, which is important not to get caught up in that. So I think you have to use a little bit of caution for sure when somebody reaches out to you. Look and see what their LinkedIn profile looks like. How many connections do they have? If they're a recruiter and they only have 5 connections, something looks fishy. See if they're publishing anything or they're posting things. So you have to use a lot of scrutiny. I think it's important to realize that these things are out there. And, when you get connection requests, take a look at, what the people are. A lot of times now people are not giving you a personal message because of the free version of LinkedIn where you only get 3 a month. But, look and see how many connections they have. Is there something in their background that looks like it would be helpful for me to connect to? So use LinkedIn, but be cautious when you're using it as well too, because of all those scams and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely good advice. Unfortunately, there are people looking to take advantage out there for sure. And I used to accept pretty much every invitation. Now I'm much more discerning in who I accept. Melanie, from a LinkedIn point of view, and I view you as the queen of LinkedIn. What would be your advice in terms of people maybe starting this year? What should they be looking at, and what should they be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, Ellen hit on a lot of those things. I mean, you can optimize your LinkedIn profile, and that is going to help. And so, if you haven't updated your profile, now would be a great time to do it. It kind of, it gives a little, juice to the engine, so to speak. And so, you definitely want to do that. But you got to remember that your LinkedIn profile is only going to take you so far. You have to now you don't have to be creating content. I know that actually you don't have to do that. Where LinkedIn is going to favor you is going to be in engagement, and engagement that you can engage on posts, but you can also engage in DMs. And so if you are kind of doing a little, maybe a 3-prong, approach. I just had a client that posted her first post sharing that she's now on a job search journey. And and one of the things that we're going through is looking at seeing who liked the post. And she's now going to go back to each of those people. And some of them are at her former job, but she's going to let them know, hey, thanks for liking this post. They didn't necessarily all comment on it, which is perfectly fine. You can, use the likes on a post, and she's going to reach out to them and kind of give them her specs and what she's looking for. So there was also 2 people in HR and recruiting that she's not connected to. So she's going to reach out and connect with them and thank them for liking her post. So there's so many different ways that you have to do it where it's not this heavy major lift. And so you don't have to, you don't have to be creating content. I do think if you are a senior leader, I think if you are a senior, anywhere from mid to senior exec, and especially executive, I do think you should be sharing your thoughts. I think you should be sharing your thought leadership in terms of how you approach situations, how you approach what's happening in the industry. That's also a good way to engage people that are in your industry. So That all being said, I think the other is just really being mindful. And to Mindy's earlier question too, if a recruiter does reach out to you and they're offering, something that just doesn't seem right, just trust your gut on it. Like if it seems too good to be true, there's a whole process, and I can promise you recruiters are not, and there's also, I mean, there's scams happening like on our phones. I get hit with like, oh, you've been selected for this job. And I'm like, well, that's great. I didn't apply for a job. So,
Mhm.
so you just have to be very like, don't click on suspicious links. Definitely look at the links that they're sending. Is it a real, just be very much, we have to be diligent in the world that we're in. Scams have been happening, unfortunately, all for ages. It's just obviously we're now in a digital age, so we're much more aware of them, and they seem much more, I mean, they're continuously getting better, and so we have to keep up with it. So there was another question, Ken, from Brittany about how to get through the ATS, and so I wanted to make sure we got to that before we wrapped up for the evening.
Okay, yes, we are getting near the top of it. And how about Melanie, we'll definitely come back to you on that as well, but why don't we give Alan a shot at that? And then we'll come back to you with that, Alan. Melanie.
Yeah, I would say, Brittany, that the better strategy is not trying to get through the ATS, but is to go around the ATS. And again, we were talking a lot tonight about networking. Try to get to the hiring managers, try to have people that give you referrals in, because statistics show that you're much more likely to be hired when that happens. I mean, the key with the ATS system, and there's multiple systems, so it's really hard to know which one they're using and what the criteria is that they have set in there. But they go mostly on keyword matching, so you want to have the keywords that are in there. So that's something that AI can help you, do an analysis, put in the job rec, put in your resume, and see how close they match as far as the keywords go, and tweak what you have there. You don't want to make it sound exactly like what the job rec is showing, because then it's going to look like it's insincere. So I think it's important not to rely on primarily doing your job search through applying to things online and trying to, get through the ATS system. I think it's important to try to, as much as you can, try to go around the system. And again, you can even apply to jobs online and then find a connection at that company and send them your resume who could get it to the hiring manager too. So I think the better strategy is not trying to spend too much time with the ATS and trying to get through it, but to find the alternative ways that are much more likely to land you the job, which is through the networking, through the recommendations and the referrals.
Okay, very good. I like that approach. And Melanie, what about you?
Yeah, so here's what I would say is that maybe my 2026's mission, if I choose to accept it, is going to the ATS is not your enemy. Okay, the ATS is a filing cabinet. It's electronic filing cabinet. So it does help. It does help recruiters parse resumes. It helps them keep track of resumes, because guess what? Prior to ATS systems, resumes sat on empty desks that were in bullpen areas, and literally recruiters just went through them one by one. So if that sounds efficient to you, then we can get rid of the ATS. I promise you it was not. And so I've always used an ATS even from day one of my recruiting career, but I worked with some of those recruiters that still had resumes in their desk, paper resumes. So the ATS does rely on keywords. So when using AI, here's what I want you to do. Does it read verbatim to the job description? Because that's going to be a clue to me that you've not used your own words authentically. If you read it, give it to somebody else that does not know. Like if they just read it and read it out loud, don't just read it, but read it out loud. Does it sound like you? If you showed up in an interview, could you talk like that? So if you're using AI, sometimes you have to be very careful. You have to I use AI for a lot of functions. So I have no problem with using these tools. I think they're amazing tools, but you have to know how to use them properly. It is not just, remember, if we put in a crappy resume, we're going to get a crappy resume back. It gives you what it gets, basically. It's not going to improve it. It'll improve it slightly, but it's still not going to, it's not a magic wand type of thing. So you have to be mindful of the content, read the content. If you're using it, make sure you tell it in the very beginning, under no circumstance, this is a prompt you have to include, under no circumstances are you to change the context or the the data, or make it, the context of that information, because it will want to please you. Those are the thing about AI, is that it wants to please you. It wants to give you the responses it thinks that you are seeking. So when using it, be mindful of it. And when it comes to the ATS, I will say this, is that, yes, the keyword searchers absolutely going to happen, but recruiters are also looking at resumes that are in the system. They're searching for candidates. They're going through them. If they know they have a job opening coming up, they're going to put in some searches, and they're going to go one by one looking at the resumes after they do the keywords. So it was something you mentioned earlier, Ken, about being reader friendly and white space. Don't have these funky formats and 2 columns and all these other things, because they don't always translate well. They don't always read well. They get sometimes caught up with the words. But just remember, there is somebody looking at your resume. And here's the other thing too, that if I'm your recruiter and you've been selected, guess what happens? I send your resume to the hiring manager. Okay. And I say, here's my slate of candidates I've chosen. Guess what? They're not looking at your resume through an ATS system. Okay. Hiring managers aren't even connected to ATS systems. If they are, it may just be able to put their requisition into the system. That's all they see. They see the actual resume. They read the actual resume. So please, 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 the ATS is not your enemy. It's the content that matters. Keywords are great, but keywords have to have purpose. And I will end on that note.
I think you're right. I think sometimes the ATS gets into people's heads. I
Yes.
think they like, I got to get the right keywords. I got to do that, and they get so caught up in that.
It literally was like, I would open my system. It's like an email. Like I would go to my emails, and then I would go to my ATS. I would open that up, and this is what I literally would do. Now, yes, if I put a job out tomorrow, I'm going to have about 100 and some resumes the next morning. I am going to use keywords to filter down. But guess what happens after the 48 hours, 72-hour period? I'm only getting like 5 or 10 resumes, maybe a day, maybe 20. I could go through 20 resumes in less than 10 minutes. I'm not even maybe using keyword searches for that. I'm literally hitting each of those that are sitting. It's like an inbox. It's sitting there saying, here's your new applications.
Yeah.
If it's over 100, I am doing keyword searches.
Right. And when you're doing that visual of the resumes, if there's one you have to fight to understand, are you going to spend a lot of time on that? Or are you going to go to one of the other 199 that you have?
If I see a big block of text, this is honest to truth. This is what I did as a recruiter. If I saw something that wasn't reader friendly, I did not read your resume.
Yeah, I get that.
Time is money when you are a recruiter. And if I have to seek out the information and I can't easily find the information, I'm not going to reach out to you to have you explain it. I have to go to the next person.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm sure I've said this to people before, but I do a lot of writing. I try to post on LinkedIn regularly, et cetera, and I'll hand my wife something to read just to check it out. And if it's like you just described, Melanie, she'll just hand it right back and say, too many words, not reading it.
Exactly. And so sometimes I think people create these or use AI tools, but then they copy and paste it. Again, I have no problem with the AI tools, truthfully. But the reason people are saying, oh, we know you used AI or we know this and that is because it literally is either using the job description verbatim. And so it's like reading, like, well, they just copied and pasted the job description, which questions your credibility. Or it sounds so like over the top. It's like, how this person speaks? Like,
Mhm.
oh, because sometimes it uses words that you're like, I would never say that. Like, I would never use that word. And so if you have, and even if you haven't used AI, please read your resume out loud. Give it to somebody
Mhm.
else and say, please read this. What do I do? Have them explain to you what you do. Can they do it? Because if they can't do it, then you know where there's a disconnect.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And Melanie, we're at the top of the hour now. So how about why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Of course, you can find me on here on LinkedIn because I do spend my time, a lot of my time on LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me, reach out. Definitely that's the easiest and fastest way. And yeah, would love to. I know I think we had a lot of new people this week, which is great. So thank you guys for joining us, and hopefully you'll be back next month.
Yes, I certainly do hope so as well. Thanks, Melanie. Great information you shared too. And for those of you listening, Melanie is a great person to reach out to if you want to talk about your job search. Another great person to reach out to is Alan. And Alan, if you want to give a final tip and then how people can get in touch with you, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, 2026 is a new year, new beginning. So stay positive, stay optimistic. Like Melanie, I think the mindset is really key to your success in the job search. People don't want to hire people that are negative or down. So you have to come across positive and encouraged, and think about it that way. You're going to land a job. It's just can't say exactly when or which one, but everybody is going to land. It's just a matter of when. And the best way to reach me is also through LinkedIn. You can mention that we met through this Career Coaches on Call, and wanted to thank Ken and Melanie for a great session, and look forward to the next one when we get together.
All right. Thank you, Alan. And again, a great input as always. And folks, if you're looking again for help, you got Melanie and you got Alan as an option. And I'd like you to consider me as an option too. I'm a career coach and an executive coach. So I too help people with their job search and help them get their heads where they need to be and then get their materials where they need to be as well. So I want to thank everybody for attending. Hope we will see you again next month. If in the meantime, any questions, reach out to any one of us. And until then, I wish you all well. And I hope everything goes great for you and that you have a very successful job search or career development if that's what you're working on.